As I mentioned in the video description to my previous video, part 3, this brief video was also recorded 3 years ago in 2023. And I want to use it to segue into my next video, part 4. This is the video where I will be conducting a full-orbited, ultra-detailed Bible study where I walk you through key passages from Exodus to Joshua, citing chapter and verse in support of every one of my claims. These will clarify and correct certain previously misunderstood biblical texts, which are sure to revolutionize your understanding of the covenants you read about in Exodus and Deuteronomy. At the conclusion of part 3 in this series, Jim asked me several questions, which I will be answering in the next 3 videos, parts 4, 5, and 6. Well, one of the questions Jim asked me was this. Besides the previously unknown meaning of the shattering of the tablets prior to 1931, what do you think is the biggest reason why people fail to recognize that Israel was without a covenant for 46 years? Well, this video contains my answer to Jim that day, 3 years ago, which I want to use as a primer to part 4. But I'm going to begin part 4 with a rolling text for you, providing you with the addresses on the screen for you of the scriptural proof that Israel was without a covenant for approximately 46 plus years. That is, from the moment they made the exodus from Egypt until they entered the promised land. So in essence, they were never under a covenant until they entered the promised land, the land of Canaan. So be sure to write these scriptural addresses down and read them in context for yourself. So please join me as I walk you through the last 5 books of the Hexateuch and demonstrate, without a doubt, that the first time Israel ever entered into a covenant with Yahweh was after the Exodus and the 40-year wilderness wandering period. So here's my answer to Jim's question. Here's what we lack as Bible students. We lack a panoramic view of what actually happened in the ancient Near East when Israel came into a covenant, as it is commonly thought. So you have 4 points of contact. The first one is the shattering of the 2 stone tablets. That's Exodus 34, right? 32. And so then you also have there's a verse, I'm going to read it momentarily, in Exodus, and another one is major, is Israel's going through the wilderness wandering period, approximately 40 years, 38 years, approximately 40 years. You see this in Leviticus and Numbers. During this period, Yahweh is delivering laws that are going to comprise what I call the second Mosaic Law Covenant, which is entered into by the Israelites in the Promised Land, which is recorded in Deuteronomy and Joshua. So here's what you have, okay? You have the shattering of the 2 stone tablets, which we saw in the previous video, that it annulled the covenant in Exodus. It never got off the ground. It's the modern day equivalent. The shattering of stone tablets is the modern day equivalent of tearing up a contract. It's like a marriage that's already, they have the marriage license. The only thing left to do now is to conduct a wedding ceremony. Well, the night before that, one of the parties proves unfaithful. So the victimized party can either go on with the marriage or tear up the contract as if the marriage never existed. And that's what you have in Exodus with the shattering of the 2 stone tablets. Then you have, I'm going to read this text here.
Let me just jump in for a second.
Go right ahead.
What you just said is the law didn't exist.
Right.
That's a big deal for these Sabbatarians who like to say the law is eternal.
Absolutely.
If the tablets are shattered, then what was written on those tablets does not exist.
Right. It was never put into effect.
Okay.
This is the modern day equivalent of tearing up a contract. And this is what it meant in the ancient Near East when a person shattered stone tablets. They were contracts. Here's a key verse that needs to be incorporated into your belief system. Because after Moses shattered the 2 stone tablets, take note of what Yahweh says in Exodus 34:10. He says, "Behold, I am going to make a covenant." Oh, I thought they were in a covenant.
And this is after the tablets had been shattered.
This is 2 chapters after Moses shattered the
and God is saying, I'm going to do what?
I'm going to make a covenant.
Meaning one did not exist?
Exactly, precisely. And actually, I'm not saying it. The scriptures are saying it.
Right.
The scriptures are teaching it now. So then what you have, like I said a moment ago, now they're going to travel through the wilderness for 38 years. Okay? And so what happens is Yahweh is delivering Moses and the Israelites laws, which are going to make up the next covenant, which they're going to establish in the promised land. And so here's what you have. They arrive at the plains of Moab just prior to Moses' death. Moses is standing on the outskirts of the promised land. This is where I ended my video, with Moses standing on top of a mount, looking down at the promised land, which he was not going to be able to enter because he misrepresented God by striking the rock in anger. And so here's what we read. This is in Deuteronomy 27. He gives the instructions in verses 1 through 10 that when they enter the promised land, they are to set up 2 pillars side by side, and they're going to inscribe the laws, all the laws of this covenant when they get there. And in verse 10 and 11, he says, when you get there, you're going to eat and drink, and you're going to rejoice. This is what's happening here is they're conducting a covenant ceremony. And at the conclusion of a ceremony is when you have the banquet. And so this is what he tells. The further instructions he gives them is this. When you arrive there, you're going to take the Levitical priests, 6 of them, 6 of the tribes, because there were 12 tribes of the Levitical priests. 6 of them are going to stand on Mount Gerizim. The other 6 are going to stand on Mount Ebal. The first group of Levitical priests are going to recite the curses for disobedience to the covenant. The second set, they're going to recite the blessings for obedience to the covenant. And that's it. These are his instructions. But now notice what he says. This is a very, very important verse right here. 29, 10 through 12. I'm going to read. He addresses Israel. Again, they're on the plains of Moab, looking out at the promised land. He says, you stand today, all of you, before Yahweh your God, your priests, your tribes, your elders, and your officers, even all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives, and the alien who is within your camps, from the one who chops your wood to the one who draws your water. Take note, that you may enter into the covenant with Yahweh your God, and into his oath, which Yahweh your God is making with you today. Okay? Therefore, this is solid evidence that they were not under a covenant. The Israelites were not under a covenant during the wilderness wandering period, Jim.
I think that is just, as you're reading this, I'm thinking, that's got to be said again. That is such a key point. And you said it earlier. The finality, the final acts of the covenant are what? Blessings and curses,
right,
and the ceremonial meal.
Right.
And that did not happen as they're wandering around in the wilderness. That only happened at the end of all that when they're about to enter into the promised land.
I'm glad you highlight that, because a covenant ceremony is absolutely essential to establishing a covenant. And this is what the covenant in Exodus did not have, because Israel played the harlot. And like I said, it's like Yahweh is depicted as the husband in the Old Testament, and Israel the bride. And so the bride, the night before the wedding ceremony, plays the harlot, and Yahweh the husband says, no covenant.
So in Exodus, we didn't have the blessings and the curses related to it. We didn't have the ceremonial food and drink to celebrate the covenant. It never got that far.
Right. The meal at the conclusion of the ceremony seals the deal. I like to say the meal seals the deal. And that's what Exodus doesn't have.
So that's going to show us, and I think you're going to show us in the video, really when I ask that question, what does it mean when the tablets are shattered in Exodus, and the relationship between that and Genesis 2, and you're already kind of getting a sneak peek of it never got off the ground. There is no relationship.
And this is the thing, okay? I know this sounds is revolutionary to you, but here's the thing: we have most people do not study the Old Testament. They barely read the New Testament, and so to many churchgoers, the Old Testament book is an esoteric book. It takes time to study those passages to arrive at a proper understanding of the Pentateuch. And like I said, I've just given you a panoramic view of what occurred in the Pentateuch, from the shattering of the two stone tablets to the time when they entered the Promised Land. It's all verifiable. All you have to do is open your Bible and go and see whether these things are so.
So there is no covenant law in Exodus.
No, it never got off the ground.
It never got off the ground. And the whole time that we're going through Deuteronomy, it's just getting off the ground. It doesn't reach its completion until the end.
It's a process culminating in the covenant meal and the ceremony, which again, Exodus does not have.
Right.